We want to welcome back to our show, number one New York Times bestselling author Dinesh D'Souza is out with his latest book called The Big Lie, Exposing the Nazi Roots of American Left. Good morning, Dinesh. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Good to be on the show.
It's good to have you back. Let's talk about this latest book. You know, unlike some of your past books, you are looking at a very dark point of 20th century history and drawing its correlation into the Democrat Party. Is there really such a straight line that we can connect those dots?
Well, the relevance of this argument comes from the fact that we are hearing today that fascism and Nazism are phenomena of the right, and that is used to make the case that Trump is a kind of fascist, that the Republicans are the party of the neo-Nazi party. And so this drove me to do a kind of searching examination of the meaning of fascism and Nazism. Turns out fascism is the ideology of the centralized state. Mussolini said everything in the state and nothing outside the state. And so the whole idea here is big government that controls the economy, state-controlled capitalism, and also government that controls the lives of individuals. Now, that doesn't sound to me a lot like the platform of the Republican Party. In fact, it sounds a lot more like the platform of the Democratic Party.
Well, you know, we did an interesting interview just a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about some of the European reactions. Actually, what's the name? Raheem Kassam joined us. It was about his book No Go Zones about Sharia law, and he was looking at Charlottesville and saying, here you have the far left of the neo-Nazis against the far left of the communists. It was like the Spanish Civil War. I think that's really been largely ignored, and you're drawing that line.
Well, this is the point that, you know, that fascism and Nazism prior to World War II were recognized by everybody to be on the left. Mussolini was a Marxist, in fact, the most famous Marxist in Italy. Hitler called his party the National Socialist Party.
Right.
So these were guys who were on the left. Now, what happened was after the war, when fascism became discredited by its association with the Holocaust, that's when the progressive scholars coming to power in America, in academia and the media, they basically knew this record, but they said, look, we don't want fascism to be perceived to be on the left. Let's try to cover that up, and let's try to move fascism and Nazism into the right-wing column so that we can now blame it on our political adversaries.
If we look at some of the ideas of purity of the Nazi fascists, again, part of it goes to, and you quote in your book from Birth Control Review, edited by Margaret Sanger, you quote her saying, more children from the fit, less from the unfit. So that's the chief issue of birth control. That sounds a lot like the Aryan purity laws.
Yeah, in fact, Sanger and her fellow progressives were very influential in shaping the Nazi sterilization laws of 1933 and later the Nazi euthanasia laws. The Nazis literally lifted the blueprint from those laws from American progressives. They even got a lot of the Nuremberg laws, the laws that discriminated against Jews. They essentially sat with blueprints of the Democratic Party, the segregation laws from the American South. They essentially crossed out the word black, wrote in the word Jew. Now, some of this is original research in the sense that when in the past scholars had pointed to parallels between things going on in America and Nazi Germany, but by looking at the transcripts of what the Nazis did, we can see that the Nazis actually relied on the American democratic example.
But don't we have to look at a difference? Some people call it the big switch of when Democrats that supported segregation in the past switched.
Well, this big switch turns out to be a big lie, and the proof of it is that if you make a list of all the racist Democrats, the so-called Dixiecrats, and there are dozens of these guys, and ask how many of them actually switched and became Republicans, you discover it was only one, Strom Thurmond. Apart from Strom Thurmond, every other Dixiecrat remained in the Democratic Party. Now, the reason people believe the big switch is the South, which was traditionally Democratic, did become Republican, but that was not due to racism. In fact, the opposite. As the South became less and less racist through the 20th century, it became more and more Republican. So what I'm saying is there's an inverse relationship between Southern racism and Southern Republicanism.
Well, we're in North Carolina, the home of Jesse Helms. I believe he was a Democrat at one time.
Yes, he was. And so, look, the real switch of the South in consolidating its position in the Republican Party came during Reagan. And it was the Reaganite appeal to patriotism, anti-communism, free markets, local government, and also Christianity. Those were you may say, the magnets that drew the South away from the Democratic Party into the Republican Party.
But as you say, exposing the Nazi roots of the American left, this is this kind of elitism that we need to battle, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a battle against a populist president.
Yes, I mean, you look today, the people point to the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, but those guys have almost no power.
Yeah.
If the Ku Klux Klan had a rally today, they'd be lucky to get 100 guys, and there'd be 500 people encircling them. On the other hand, these Antifa guys on the campus who are driving out speakers, who disrupted Trump's inauguration, who conduct riots in major cities, those guys have the backing of the mainstream media, the backing of powerful forces in academia and Hollywood. So the fascism of the institutions is even more dangerous than the fascism of the street.
So what do you want people to take out of this as a plan of action out of their book? Again, Dinesh D'Souza, the book is The Big Lie, Exposing the Nazi Roots of the American Left.
Well, the first thing is I think that, when you expose a lie or in the left has been playing, for example, the fascism card. Once you expose it, it loses its power. That's the first important thing. Knowledge is a source of power. The second, I think, is the importance of enforcing the law across the board. So the white supremacist who drove his car into that poor woman crossing the street, he's going to get his comeuppance. But it's really important that these felony riders, for example, there were 200 of them who were arrested after the inauguration, 11 of them journalists, by the way. Now, normally on the left, when you get arrested, you expect to be thrown in jail for the night. You come out in the morning, and the next day you can go on MSNBC. I'd like to see these felony riding statutes, which, by the way, carry 5 to 10 years in prison, enforced so that the law is being enforced across the board. I think once that happens, some of this nonsense will stop.
Yeah, just one further comment just to make, because having grown up in North Carolina and the South, I did follow Jesse Helms' career, and one of the things that you have to realize is that some people do have epiphanies, and they do change. I mean, he saw some of the error of his earlier ways, and he ended up with a former civil rights leader who was his chief of staff, and they had lots of affinity towards more inclusiveness as he went on, including with AIDS relief, et cetera. So there is a difference in how those parties evolved.
Yeah, even Thurmond, by the way, when he became a Republican, he was not the old Dixiecrat Strom Thurmond. He actually now was within the mainstream of the Republican Party, supporting Republican positions and not echoing the outright racism that was commonplace beforehand.
This is an interesting look at history, and when we look at again some of the things that scare us most about who is fit and who is not fit, we should look at some fear about where our country is headed at these things. Do you think that we have a moment that have we reached a moment of point of no return, or we can turn this around?
Well, I'm the product of the 1980s, the Reagan generation, and you could envision Reagan and Tip O'Neill having a knockdown political argument, but then going to have a beer afterward. We don't live in that America right now, and I'm hoping to get it back.
Yeah. Indeed, that is kind of the an image I often take away as well too. Tip O'Neill could definitely have his way with words and his strident moves, but his opponents would often admire him and sit with him and sup with him as well too. So that it's important to know. Dinesh D'Souza, The Big Lie, Exposing the Nazi Roots of the American Left. Dinesh, thank you for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
This is Coastal Daybreak here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. More to come in a moment.